Hello everyone, and welcome to Fright Night. Are you ready for a scary story? A young woman working a late shift, a remote forest road at night, and a deadly killer in pursuit. We've all been there, driving alone when we get that unnerving feeling that the car behind us might be following, watching, waiting with some sinister intent. This story preys on that primal terror of running, or rather driving, for one's life, and offers a whole new reason to fear what lurks in the dark. Are you sure you're ready for the classic urban legend, high beams? Stephanie hated closing shifts, not just because of the late hours, but because of the even longer drive home. The store she worked at was located about 45 minutes from the city where she actually lived, and the road that led to her house stretched on for miles through lonely farmlands and forests. Several times, she'd almost fallen asleep at the wheel, and she often asked herself what she would do if she were ever in an accident in the middle of nowhere, or even just got a flat tire so far from help. On this particular night, however, Stephanie hated her late shift for an entirely different reason. About 15 minutes from close, a man had entered the store. He was probably around her age, maybe a little older, was tall, muscular, had an unkempt 5 o'clock shadow across his face, and several tattoos that were just barely visible below the sleeves of his long, distressed leather jacket. She couldn't put her finger on it, but something about him gave her the chills. He had this serious way about him, and the few times their gazes had actually met, it felt as if his icy blue eyes were piercing through her very soul. He lingered much longer than most as he shopped the liquor section of the store, and every few minutes, his head would dart quickly around, as if he was nervously scoping out his surroundings. Stephanie watched this stranger closely, and after what felt like forever, he approached the checkout line. "Getting pretty dark out there," he commented as he set a bottle of bottom-shelf whiskey down on her check stand and pointed to some cigarettes behind the counter. "You out here this late, all alone?" Stephanie was taken aback by the question. No, she replied. "My boyfriend actually comes to meet me every night to make sure I get home okay." This was a blatant lie. Stephanie didn't have a boyfriend, much less anyone who was up late enough to meet her after close. But this man scared her, and she wasn't about to let him know that. "Oh, that's good," said the man with an odd tone of dejection in his voice. "It's just that, well, you guys close in about 5 minutes, right? And I didn't see any other cars out there in the parking lot." "He's just, running late," she lied. "Do you need a bag for this?" "No," he said, his voice trailing off for a moment. "I'll see you later, Stephanie." How had he known her name? She looked down at the cash register. Oh, right, the nameplate. Still, she watched nervously as the man exited the store, then made his way across the parking area to an old red pickup truck that was parked at the back end of the lot. Though it was a little early, she locked up the store and went through her closing checklist, and by the time she was done stocking, cleaning, and prepping the place for the next day, she'd almost forgotten about her strange encounter with the weird man. She flipped off the lights, exited the store, and locked the front door. But when she turned to make her way towards her SUV, her blood ran cold. The man's truck was still parked on the other end of the lot, and though it was dark, thanks to the streetlight a few yards out, she could just make out his silhouette within. He was smoking a cigarette, and she could tell by the way his head was turned that he was watching her closely. Stephanie's heart began to race. She hurried across the lot, jumped in her car, started it as quickly as possible, and took off in the direction of home. Chillingly, however, as she did so, the stranger started his truck as well and ripped out of the parking lot after her. She sped away from the store and checked her mirror. Just as she'd feared, the truck was right on her tail. He was following her so closely, in fact, that Stephanie felt that if she so much as tapped the brakes, he was sure to rear-end her. Her heart was racing. She reached for her phone, but in her nervousness, accidentally dropped it between the seats. She quickly returned her attention to the road, and that's when it started. The man following her flashed his high beams once, twice, and each time he did so, Stephanie was blinded for a few seconds. She focused on the road while she racked her brain. Her panic was clouding her judgment, but slowly, she tried to work this dangerous situation out in her head. The stranger's truck was old and probably couldn't go as fast as her newer SUV. She would try to outrun him. She began to accelerate, but it was as if the man had read her mind. He matched her speed, and his rig was surprisingly quick. Before she could think of another plan, she was distracted by those damned high beams again, which the stranger kept flashing through her back windows. And after a while, he began to escalate his behavior, swerving, accelerating, and braking dangerously behind her. She watched as he cut left, right, flashed his high beams, honked his horn, and then sped up again to get so close that their bumpers were nearly touching. Then suddenly, Stephanie knew what she had to do. She would keep this stranger, this creep, close to her car and take him far out back roads. She'd let him feel like he had the upper hand. She'd take him a route nobody knew, and last minute, well, she knew just where to drop him. The man's driving got scarier as they journeyed onward. He continued to flash his high beams erratically, honk, swerve, and several times, he even tried to pull up next to her as if he was getting ready to ram her, but Stephanie stayed focused. After what seemed like forever, she rounded a corner and spotted the turnoff that, in a matter of blocks, would take her directly from the forest to the front lot of none other than the police station. Without giving it another moment's thought, Stephanie ripped into the station's parking lot, honking her horn and flashing her lights. And in under a second, a handful of police officers had emerged from the entrance with their guns drawn. To her surprise, however, the stranger's truck followed her right into the lot, as if this monster wasn't scared of being arrested. Stephanie threw herself from her car. "Help!" she screamed at the group of police officers while pointing back at the truck. "That guy! He followed me from my work! He's trying to kill me! Please!" The officers turned their attention and guns to the truck, but before they could get a clear shot past Stephanie's car, the truck's door flew open, and the man from earlier jumped quickly through it and came sprinting at Stephanie. "No!" she screamed, "please!" But to Stephanie's surprise, the stranger pushed right past her, ran to the back of her car, and opened the hatch of her SUV as if he was looking for something. As he was rummaging around, the back driver's side door of her own car flew open, and before anyone could react, another man with a large knife jumped out and disappeared into the bushes. "I'm so sorry," said the stranger. "I didn't mean to scare you earlier. I'm Jake. I saw that guy getting into the back of your car when I pulled up to the store. The whole drive, he was trying to climb over the seats with that knife to get at you, and every time I flashed my lights or made you swerve, he'd duck back down for cover. God knows what he would have done if I wouldn't have stopped him." Over the next few months, Jake and Stephanie would become close. Jake had just moved to town to start a mill job that kept him working late, and despite Stephanie insisting she'd be fine, he would show up every night after work to make sure she got home safely. While life would slowly get back to normal, the two would often talk about that fateful night and how only really one thing bothered them. The police had never caught the backseat killer. He was still out there, is still out there, always lurking and looking for his next victim. Ooh, what a terrifying tale. But where did it come from, and is there any truth to this classic story? Historically, initial renditions of the high beams legend were first spread among young American teenagers and drivers sometime through the early to mid-1950s, and it's suspected they were designed as cautionary tales to warn of the dangers of night driving in a time when roads weren't always as great and many routes were still virtually unlit. These earlier versions usually just detailed the actual car chase, and either the protagonist, which was usually a couple or a young woman, either got away by the skin of their teeth or was never heard from again. By the 1970s, the legend had evolved to include the twist so many of us are familiar with today, in that it would initially paint the stranger following the woman as the villain, only to later reveal that he was actually the hero, and the villain was in the protagonist's back seat the entire time. Notably, through this same era, folklorists from across America would begin documenting this story as part of the growing genre of urban legends. Then, through the 1980s, the tale would only gain more traction when it was featured in several works by master of urban legends Jan Harold Brunvand, who included it both in his 1981 publication The Vanishing Hitchhiker, and again in his 1984 publication The Choking Doberman, following which, newer versions of the legend would continue to sprout up across the US and Canada. More recently, through the 1990s, high beams would be featured in a slew of TV productions and pop culture references, and from the early 2000s into the present, it has been included in creepypasta archives, horror blogs, and social media posts, ensuring both its popularity and relevance. As far as any ties to reality go, disturbingly, this legend actually holds more weight in the real world than many of its more popular predecessors. Through the 1960s and 70s, a string of newspaper articles and police reports detail instances of attackers or killers hiding down in the back seats of vehicles. In 1977, in Detroit, Michigan, a very real, very documented case tells of a woman who was warned by another driver of a man hiding in her back seat by way of flashing headlights, and her could-be or would-be attacker was later discovered lying in wait on the floor and was subsequently arrested by police. Now guys, this is literally parallel to our urban legend in question. While I have been able to draw certain similarities to other urban legends I've covered in the past, for the first time so far, I can actually solidify this one, being high beams, as 100% true. Through the 80s and 90s, countless additional reports would include an attacker, thief, or killer who was later discovered hiding in the backseat of a vehicle, and these instances would act as confirmations to the validity of this spine-tingling story. From the early 2000s through the present, various police and safety organizations still warn drivers to always check their back seats in case someone or something might be hiding there. And while not as common as was in the eras before cameras and modern crime scene analysis, there are still accounts of such instances transpiring. These cases do a lot to blur the line between fact and folklore, and only further ensure that this classic story, High Beams, remains chilling, by way of tapping into a danger that has, on occasion, proven itself to be quite real. So next time you clock out for the night, finish up at the gym, get out of the movie theater, leave school, or whatever else might be keeping you up late, and you find your vehicle is the only one left in the lot, pop the trunk, shine a light through the windows, call a friend if you have to. But above all, remember to always check the back seat.